Welcome to the Flare Up Show. This show is produced by the amazing Clarissa Burton in the Limelight Media. And today I have Mia J. Hanks, who is a survivor of narcissistic abuse and author of the book Bridemaid, a Memoir. She is dedicated to raising awareness about narcissism and letting other victims know that they're not alone. In her memoir, she shares stories about her nearly 30-year marriage to a covert narcissist, told in a series of short stories. She gives you the first-hand account of day-to-day life with a narcissistic spouse, helpful tips for victims, and hope of finding life outside of abuse. Welcome to the show, Mia. I'm super happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
I just so excited. I would actually really love to just start with your story. Could we just sort of start at the beginning and share what you would like to share about you, yourself, and where the book came from?
Yeah, certainly. So like you said in the intro, I'm the author of Bridemaid. Basically, I got into a marriage with a covert narcissist. Of course, I didn't know it at the time, but I was 21 when I got married, and yeah, I was not aware of narcissism, narcissistic abuse, and I think in my generation people assumed that domestic abuse was physical. And there was not a lot of talk around emotional, psychological abuse. So long story short, I stayed in this marriage for a very long time. I had two children and really just kind of felt trapped. I felt like that was the cards I had been dealt, and I had to make it work. So I hung in there as long as I could, and more years passed, and I started seeking information. I knew something was wrong, and I learned about narcissism and specifically covert narcissism, and I knew that's what I had been dealing with. So after 29 years, I got out of my marriage, and after I divorced, I decided to write a memoir about my experiences.
Yes, sharing stories is so powerful, especially something like covert narcissism. It can be very isolating. So to hear other people, I know for myself in similar type of relationships, it's just to hear someone else go like, "Hey, that's not right. You shouldn't accept that." That is so powerful. And so thank you for sharing your story with everybody. I love the image of the bird cage, and you talk about the golden cage and how that is sort of your, I guess, analogy for covert narcissism is it wasn't even just the way you describe it in the book. It wasn't even just him building a cage around you, but you were helping build the cage. So could you explain what covert narcissism is and what that means by playing a role in the narcissist plan of your abuse?
Yes. So, when you hear the term narcissism, you think of this very outwardly arrogant, pompous person. But a covert narcissist, it's considered one of the more dangerous types of narcissism. And the reason is that these people, to the outside world, they are very generous, they're very humble, they're kind, they're empathetic. But it's all a lie. So behind closed doors, they are a true narcissist. Everything is about them. The world revolves around them. As your partner, you are responsible for their feelings, their emotions. If anything goes wrong, it must be your fault. They can't take blame for anything. So it's a very difficult dynamic because everybody on the outside thinks you're married to the most perfect husband. This is the most perfect husband, the most perfect father. And who's going to believe you if you say, well, actually, they're abusive? In my world and people who knew us, mutual friends, nobody would have believed me. So yeah, covert narcissism it's dangerous, and it's hard to identify. It's hard to find support once you do identify it, and it's hard to escape from.
Mhm. Yes. Can you share what maybe some of the red flags were that you saw and that people can look for in a relationship?
I would say the first red flag that I saw very early in my marriage was that lack of empathy. It just was so apparent in everyday life. It would be things like I share in my book. If I was sick, or I wasn't feeling well, instead of being sympathetic, empathetic, saying, "Hey, how can I help you? I know you're having a bad day. I know you're not feeling well." My husband's response would be to be angry with me.
Hmm.
I had ruined his day. I had messed up his plans because, with a narcissist, it is all about them. So they don't want anybody getting in their way or, or changing up the plans that they have. And so, yeah, that general lack of empathy was definitely a red flag. I would say another red flag is, if your partner is making you feel um, bad about yourself, if you're second guessing yourself, if you feel like you're losing confidence on a daily basis, those types of things are really important to look for and really ask yourself, how does this person make me feel about myself? That's
Hmm.
really a key question.
It really is. It really is. What are, was there a moment in your relationship that was like the last straw? Like, or was it an awakening over time? Like, what happened where you were finally like, oh my God, like this has to stop and it has to end now for me?
I would say over time, it was kind of a slow build. Narcissists, I think a lot of people end up staying in these relationships for so long because you feel like eventually it's going to get better. When
Mhm.
we get to this next stage of life, when we have less stress, it's going to get better. That's not true. Narcissism gets worse with age. And so over time, every year was worse than the year before. And I kind of just reached a breaking point where I started delving into this and researching what is wrong with this relationship. What is at some point you just realize this can't be okay. And I think the kind of the final straw, so to speak, was just my physical health. I was crumbling
Yeah.
under the stress that I was living under, and I was having physical symptoms. I was having chronic pain, and headaches, stomach aches, everything. I felt horrible every day, and it really became a matter of I need to figure out what's going on because my body cannot withstand this anymore.
It is, it is so unbelievable to me how they can gaslight and, convince someone that they're not seeing things clearly, but yet the body is clearly experiencing uh pain, discomfort. I mean, sometimes it can lead into autoimmune disorders, is sort of some of the links that they're going to, that when we deny ourselves and our needs for so long, eventually our body does shut down, which was also very similar to my own experience. I'm so glad that you did this and that you're feeling healthy and well enough, especially to share this information. What were the challenges that faced? What was the process like for you to leave the narcissist? And what could some people that are like, I think I need to get out of this unhealthy relationship, what are some things that they should be aware of that could become obstacles for them?
I think leaving a narcissist is not like leaving a neurotypical person. I think that you have to realize right from the start that you're not dealing with a rational human being. And so, definitely, there are challenges that you wouldn't see with a neurotypical person. My advice would be to plan. You really do. You really have to plan. You don't know what's going to set these people off, and any disruption in their day could trigger them. So, you hear a lot of people talk about going no contact when you leave. In my experience, I didn't feel like that was a safe way to do it.
Hmm.
To me, that felt like it was going to trigger him, and I just didn't want to go that route. So I did not go no contact. I went low contact, and eventually just tapered off. But it wasn't a sudden thing. Um, but as far as advice for people who feel like they need to get out, listen to your body and listen to your intuition. And if you feel like you need to get out, really start planning. And the first step in planning, well, the first step is to build a support system, and identify a place to go. But the second step that is so, so important is start stashing away some cash. You're going to need money to leave. And in my situation, my ex-husband was guilty of financial abuse. When he realized that I was not coming back, draining the bank accounts and making it impossible for me to live. These are all tactics that the narcissist will use to get you to come back. If they can control you financially, they can control you physically. And so, yeah, a huge tip would be to start setting aside money because you definitely will need that in order to make a successful escape.
Yes, definitely money or resources. Why why do people stay so long? Like 30 years is a long, long time. I was married for 11, which was long for me. Why do we try so hard? I know that by the end of it, I felt like I was a pretzel because I was so convinced that the problem was me and I was doing everything I could to change. And it was just exhaustion, right? By the end, you're just like, there's nothing left. I don't even know who I am anymore. And it was funny, even in the leaving, which you may understand this, even in the leaving, my concern wasn't how can I be most comfortable? It was how can I get away with as little inconvenience to them and make this as easy on them? Because again, I'm the problem and I'm the one that's leaving. Why do we do that? Why do we give away ourselves so much?
My experience is, I mean, exactly what you said. In that leaving process, my concern was for him. And I think we are so conditioned from such an early, for in my case, such an early age in this marriage to make your life about them. And so you do, over time, you give up yourself and he became my full-time job, and so I think we stay for a variety of reasons. Financial abuse is one thing. Generally, narcissists control the finances. And so if you can't access money, you can't leave. So financial abuse is big. I think another thing that people don't talk about, and it was the case this was in my situation, is the embarrassment factor. Um, for me, I don't know how everybody else feels, but it was embarrassing to admit that I had subjected myself to this abuse for so long.
Mhm.
And so I think a lot of people just, you want people to think you have it together. You want people to think that your life is great. And so you lie to yourself. And to avoid that embarrassment, I think a lot of people will stay for that reason. And then just, it seems too daunting to get out, you know? And so I think what we do is we normalize the abuse and we tell ourselves this is how everybody lives and this is how it is. And, and we kind of start gaslighting ourselves. So yeah, it's just leaving is not easy. People say, if you're in an abusive relationship, why don't you just leave? But it just doesn't work like that. There are so many layers of psychological trauma that have to be peeled away and have to be healed before we can even think about leaving a situation.
Mhm. Would you be willing, because I was the same, I was a mom, although my children were probably younger when than you, but would you be able to share maybe the complexity of also being a co-parent with a covert narcissist?
Yeah, my situation is different because when I left, my kids were both grown. They were both out of high school.
Yes.
And so, that made it easier for me. I didn't have to deal with custody, family court. Those things can be a nightmare with a narcissist. So, as far as co-parenting goes, I mean, I can't imagine being in a situation where I'm like sharing custody, and how that would work. It would be challenging for sure.
Mhm.
But the way that my situation works now with my kids both being grown is that I don't have to have any communication with my ex-husband. So, do we co-parent? I guess, in the sense that we're both parents, but we don't have to communicate. So that part, for me, I got lucky there. That was a little easier.
It does get a little easier. One of my children is grown now, and it is easier, but also there's different challenges. They're like, Mom, what are we gonna do when I get married? Those kinds of things start to play in our minds. We're like, oh yes, because they obviously still have a relationship, so it's quite different. But it's interesting how life is so connected in this way, right? And how you must be, I hope you are very, very proud of yourself. And it's almost a relief when you're in that situation, or when you're sort of potentially maybe have to interact, how it's less suffering for us or for you, and it's more like, wow, look how far I've come. That didn't even like get to a 2 on my Richter scale inside, right? Like like
Yeah.
it's this peaceful. It's like they don't have to change, but we change. And that's the beauty of sharing your story, because it inspires other people to put themselves first, and the right partner will want you to put yourself first, just as you would want them to put themselves first, and then make a partnership out of that, right?
Yeah, I think it's still really hard though, as far as like interaction, and I have had minimal interaction with my ex-husband since the divorce. The thing about narcissism is they kind of don't ever stop.
No.
That the abuse you can expect will continue in some form or another, even after your divorce. I was speaking with a woman the other day who said she's been out of her marriage for 11 years, and her ex-husband is still finding ways to try to make her life difficult. So yeah, I mean, I think it kind of doesn't ever end, but like you say, we change and we grow and we heal, so that those things they do perhaps don't trigger us like they used to. And
Yeah.
that's kind of the goal. I don't think they ever stop, but maybe we change the way we react to that.
Yes. There's a really brilliant teacher that I've had on the show before, Andy Hahn, and he always says healing is the ability to handle what we could not previously handle. So that's sort of where I think that when they make their attempt and you're not as triggered as before, I'm like, okay, there's progress there. There's definitely healing there, which is beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I can see that in myself as well. I had zero resilience toward the end of my marriage. Every little thing, I would just fall apart. So I definitely feel stronger and more resilient now. So yeah, definitely a sign of healing.
So tell us a little bit about what your life is like now. What are you celebrating? How is your health now? What is the process of your healing journey?
I would say after probably 2 weeks of being out of that house, my body I felt like a new person. It was almost instant, it was
Yeah.
crazy how quickly I recovered. And that, was just a testament to the fact that he was, the lifestyle that he was putting me through was making me sick. Um, yeah, today I just crave the things I crave today are not the things that I, would have thought I would want 50 years ago. I Today I just crave simplicity,
Hmm.
and peace, no conflict. And yeah, the things that I want now are so different. Just time with my family. I live a very simple life now, and
Hmm.
it's quiet. And all those things that I longed for in that marriage, I wanted simplicity. That's what I wanted so, so badly. I felt like my life was so complicated. And it was. So yeah, today, quiet, simple, easy, and I feel good.
That's amazing. Congratulations. I'm so proud of you and
Thank
your
you.
book. And what has the response been like for your book now that it's out in the world? What have you seen?
Um, yeah, I've gotten really good feedback. I really hope that it lands on the right hands of, people who need it, people who need to hear that firsthand account. When I left my husband, I was on a mission to find out everything I could about narcissism. I wanted to learn everything I could. And everything I found was written by either a therapist or a psychologist. I just couldn't find that firsthand account that I was looking for. And so that's sort of how the book came to be. I wanted to put an insider point of view out there. So I do hope that other victims can find their way to this book, and I hope it gives them a voice, and it makes them feel like their feelings are valid, and maybe makes them realize, hey, this is not right, and I need to get out of this relationship.
Amazing. And where can people find your book and you?
So I have a website, miajhanks.com, and there's a link on my website to purchase the book through Amazon. But it's available everywhere online books are sold. Amazon, Walmart, Target, Barnes and Noble, and it's available in paperback and ebook format.
Wonderful. And before we wrap up for today, are there any last words of wisdom or encouragement that you would like to share?
Yeah, I would like to tell other people out there who are listening who, feel like they are stuck in one of these relationships that they can't get out. I really would like to convey the message that even though it feels like you're stuck, you are not stuck. There is always a way out. There's always a path, and there are resources available and help out there. So don't stay in a relationship because you feel stuck, because you're not.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much, Mia, for sharing everything. We really appreciate having you on the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.